Who dat to everybody? Welcome back to the Who Dat Confessional podcast. As well, we're getting into the deepness of the season. This is like where you really know if you're a football fan or just like a Saints fan. Football fans, they've checked out by now. Draft's over, basketball's over. They're going to wait. The rest of you diehard crazy folks are paying attention to rookie mini camps and the fact that we have still, to this day, trade discussions about Marshawn Lattimore. And of course, New Orleans Saints signed 6 of their 7 draft picks. So that's something to celebrate. So we'll talk about that. Everything else in our latest Who Dat Confessional podcast episode. Welcome in. Appreciate all of you. Love you. Shout out to Paul Parker, Mr. Jerry, James Griffon, Jimbo and Bruno, Cliff, TJ, one of our moderators. Everybody, Gerald Stevenson, Appreciation. Welcome in. Who Dat? I don't know how much we really want to get into the renewed rumors of Lattimore being traded as a post-June 1st trade. I will go over the financial, we can word it as financial pitfalls. Sean Phillips, great to see you. Or we can just simply word it for what it is. If they did make that move financially, it would cut some of the dead cap that they have to owe and split it over 2 years and make it like a 2010 thing instead of it being just everything up front. That would be better than trading him before. But here's what I've got to say to that. The initial point still stands from 3 months ago. Now, I'm only bringing this up because it's been being brought up on social media with a lot of rumors popping up. Not everybody can just be happy with the roast of Tom Brady. They have to continue to find other things to nitpick and discuss. So one of the things that is coming up more and more is this Lattimore trade. And I get that with us going into May and June, which are really quiet times in most football worlds, you look for things to talk about. I think most of this is talk at the moment, but the rumor mill was that Marshawn Lattimore was going to be traded to somebody in the AFC. And beyond that, it was also Lattimore himself be happy about that. And that's where the big drama side of this and the rumor mill side of this all kind of comes in heavy is that, supposedly Lattimore, and I'm saying supposedly, this is all conjecture. I don't know. I really don't. I don't think so. I think, again, a lot of this is late drama because it's May, it's June. People need things to write about. And it's not even that there isn't a basis. It could be one of those things where somebody talked to somebody, and that's fair. But just because one person talked to one person who's heard something doesn't mean it's actually happening, right? So the rumor, and I've seen different pages, Saints fan pages and blogs talk about this a little bit deeper, or how Lattimore is apparently liking posts of things that have to do with this. And the big thing is if you're New Orleans, you would lose or have $30 million in dead money this year if you wanted to make the type of trade. Obviously, that would be financially crippling for the season. And you'd have to get something of extreme value back. With us seeing it really only be third rounders here this past offseason, it's hard to imagine Lattimore getting traded, or if he did get traded, you would immediately feel, or many people would immediately feel, well, dang, Nola just got wrecked. We've been had in a trade again. And I'll be honest, I kind of believe that. I kind of feel that way. I feel like if New Orleans made the type of decision, it's definitely not one that's in their best interest. But who knows? It is something that we at least got to bring up, though, here in the show, even if we only talk about it for the first 5 minutes, because it has been brought up. I think the only concerning part is if it is true that Lattimore's out here is liking trade proposals and getting him off the team, you certainly don't like to have that situation arise. That's exactly what happened with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, though to Lattimore's credit, he's certainly not the level of drama that CJ was towards the end, and he certainly doesn't seem to be having any of those type of antics, whether it be locker room, disruptive, things like that. And that's not to accuse CJ of doing anything besides what we already know the man did and has done with multiple franchises. He just is who he is. Not trying to besmirch his name or character, but everybody's pretty familiar that he was not happy his last days in New Orleans, and he made it very well known. So Lattimore doesn't seem to be doing that, but it would be concerning if you have a guy who is playing for your team that doesn't want to be there. I mean, that's obviously a potential locker room disruption. Now, TJ says you'd be better off trading him to a playoff or playoff hopeful team mid-season when urgency is higher. That could be true, TJ. That could be with more value. And that's also working on the assumption that he stays healthy, right? And he's available for that. And I'll be honest, it also would have to be a situation where New Orleans was sucking in the season and a playoff ascending team needed help because we know how New Orleans is. If they even believe they have the slightest chance of winning the division, they are absolutely not trading away a critical piece. But if New Orleans, God forbid, follows in the footsteps of the Godfather promises and starts off 1-5, then absolutely it's up for debate. But if they're 3-4, 4-3, anything around that number, hard to imagine them trading a key piece of their team before the trade deadline. But you're right that would probably have the most value and still have, several teams available to make that move too. I do still believe at the end of the day that this is mostly just rumor mill stuff. And until I actually see New Orleans make a move, it's hard to imagine they will. And I would argue evidence of that is how predictable they were in the draft process. I don't feel like they did anything in the draft that would indicate that they are ready to move on from Marshawn Lattimore. And that might seem counterintuitive considering the New Orleans Saints just drafted a corner who, by many people's standards, is ready to play right now. I think New Orleans is simply addressing a position of depth and making sure that there's a long-term future there. I don't think that was hey, this is replacing Marshawn Lattimore, because we know that New Orleans doesn't want to put Paulson Debo as the number one man on the island. You've had some up and down from Alontae Taylor, and you're certainly not just going to throw a rookie out there to be the guy, even though that has happened by kind of coincidence the past 2 years where Alontae Taylor had to play boundary, Paulson Debo had to play. So that has happened, but that's not the plan you go into it with. And going by how Loomis and especially DA have talked, you have Lattimore being a key piece of this. And I'm not saying that Kool-Aid can't be a good corner. I actually love what New Orleans is doing, building their corner room, building their DB room. Still feel like safety could use a little bit more love, but they're working on it. So, okay. The main thing I see when I look at this team, I see a team that's trying to keep their stars in a guy like Lattimore and then build on top of that. So you look at the defense coming into this season, there's really nobody on defense that's expected to be a starter that's a rookie. Doesn't mean it can't happen. But you look at the proposed starters for every positional group. They're all veterans. Now, behind those veterans are some really interesting names like Kool-Aid and some very interesting and established players like Alontae Taylor or Paulson Debo, who are young, 25 and younger type guys that can be immediate contributors. It's the offensive side that has more potential to see immediate starters from guys like Silis Fuaga and maybe even a guy like Bub Mean sneaking in some snaps. Maybe not, but maybe not. Still, opportunity is there for the offensive side, a little bit more the defense side. I think that they want to build around Lattimore and confident in what they have until it's no longer there. TJ says Kool-Aid replacing Taylor before Marshawn, maybe. But I'll be honest, I'm not one of those that's down on Alontae Taylor after his slump of a rookie year, slump of a sophomore year. Same way I wasn't on a Debo. I like both of them. And Charles Como says, I wouldn't mind if they got a starting guard or tight end in a trade, maybe a 5th or 6th round pick. That would be a rough one for me to sell, to me personally. I understand the logic of what you're saying. Those are two things that New Orleans needs. Left guard, yeah. Right guard, fine. Center, fine. Assuming you keep Fuaga right tackle, fine. If you put him over at left tackle, then right tackle is a question, because Ross Jackson actually did a great episode of Locked on Saints. I do like to give a shout out to our other podcasts out there, the rest of the amazing community that is the Who Dat Nation, and all of the shows, bloggers, writers, etc., that make up both media and fandoms. If you haven't checked it, he talked about, could this be the last snaps that we've seen of Ryan Ramchick just due to health? And that very well might be a possibility. Also, one of the reasons that I'm actually excited to see New Orleans get their draft pick signed immediately, so there's like no hesitation. The only person who hasn't actually signed with the team as of today is Kool-Aid. But everybody else, Spencer Rattler, Bub Means, Silis Fuaga, Jalen Ford, Christian Boyd, and Josiah Ezram have all signed with the Saints. So, again, we get to see what that looks like. And actually, as I tend to do, I'm very interested in the very last pick for the Saints, in Ezram, about seeing him. Because you got to remember that technically New Orleans drafted 2 offensive tackles in this draft, what they needed. So I'm actually really curious to see what he looks like in camp. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be a starter. I am saying very interested to see both of them because opportunities are there. Now, Bronze, Flat Power God, I agree with him. Says don't trade Lattimore. And I said even during the beginning of this offseason that it had to be a very valuable trade, right? I mean, you had to be talking about first round pick, something giving New Orleans an edge. And it doesn't feel like any of this gives New Orleans an edge. And maybe that's me just showing a little bit of New Orleans bias. But I do believe that Marshawn Lattimore is a borderline all-pro player when he's healthy. I do realize that he's never made an all-pro. But at the same time, I don't think everybody makes an all-pro who deserves to make an all-pro. And sometimes same thing goes for Pro Bowl. I still think that we have watched him play at a high level, regardless of what we want to debate that level is. High level that you don't want to just throw a rookie in and say, hey, rookie, make this happen. Now, Sean says, I think it's a little more premature to trade out Lattimore. Side note, I'd love to see T-Rex back in the black and gold. My only thing with that is, how are you going to afford him? I got nothing against the idea of Trey Hendrickson coming back to New Orleans. That's it. Trading for him and paying for him, that's tough. That's tough, right? And there's a lot of drama going on in Cincy because it's not just T-Rex. It's Higgins, and we've got Burrow talking out about all this stuff, and very curious to see what happens up there. And I do agree that New Orleans needs pass rush. Absolutely. But I don't even know if I'd make the trade for T-Rex just because the financial position you put yourself in trading Lattimore, like you would have to assume a lot of his dead cap and then taking on another big contract just seems rough. You know, it's New Orleans is always in a position that they have to weigh their financial moves heavier than a lot of other teams. I've never said that the method they use in terms of manipulating the cap is wrong, but it does make things a little bit more difficult. So that would be something to consider when you're talking about that. So let's hit some more of these comments because we love the comment chipping in. Randy says trading Lattimore wouldn't get you comparable talent. I would hold off till unless things start going off the rails. Again, have to agree because as chat points out, when healthy, Lattimore's top 5, at worst, a top 10 corner in the league. And he's been mostly healthy. I know, and if Dr. Billy Oshie was here right now, he's one of our other moderators for those who are listening in, he probably wouldn't have as nice of things to say because we know how he is about guys who need to play every game. But 10 games last year, obviously a little bit of disappointment, 7 games the year before that. But this is a guy that for 4 straight years played 14 or more games at his skill position. Is very difficult. It's my hope that he's obviously healthier this year. That's also when you get a guy like Kool-Aid and Alontae Taylor with Paulson Debo, because if he's not, because again, when healthy, I argue top 5, top 10 player when healthy. But if he's not healthy, you have somebody ready to go just in case, because there wasn't really a drop-off in the DB room when Lattimore didn't play last year, but it was an improvement. At the same time, you had an elite level of defensive back play with Lattimore there, but they were still able to compensate without him. Whereas, I don't know, I just don't feel the same way if you go into the season without him being there. I'm not saying that the team wouldn't be as good, but there's a question like, could Kool-Aid elevate and be elite? We've seen Dennis Allen, and if there's one thing that everybody in chat should trust Dennis Allen on, it's DBs and how his DB room typically plays, because it typically plays very well. That doesn't mean that you have to believe in his merits as a head coach, nor does it mean that you have to believe in his merits really for all other positional groups. But you've got almost a decade now back in New Orleans where he's pretty consistently led the DB room in a very positive direction, regardless of the talent level / people that were there. And that you've yet to see this DB team be in the bottom in any category. They're just not there, even with old heads and randoms and guys off the street. So I trust in that singular area, this team to be fine. Would obviously love them to find ways to patch up other areas, like potentially bring in somebody like T-Rex, right, for defensive end. King Arthur, good to see, says, I just don't want Loomis to do Lattimore like Toronto did DeMar DeRozan. Tell him he's valued and you're not trading him, only to turn around and trade him the next week. Where's the integrity? Definitely get that. I will say this. And keep in mind that I'm not taking the team side here because I say for the players to do this every opportunity. Y'all have heard me say it. Teams aren't loyal to you. You shouldn't be loyal to the team. Now, you should be loyal to the fans and loyal to your teammates. But you shouldn't be loyal to the team. Whatever's on the side of your helmet should not be what you're loyal to. You should be loyal to your brotherhood and loyal to the fans that support you every day as you try to be the best as you can be. But in terms of the team, look, I love the New Orleans Saints. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Mickey Loomis and company have played their hand with the player's best interest at heart. I don't think that's always the case. Now, are they as bad as Atlanta about drafting your future quarterback without telling the guy that you just paid big money to? No, they're not that bad. But at the same time, would it shock me for them to have 3 months of, yeah, we're not going to trade Lattimore, and then a good deal come across the table and they'd be like, changed our mind? Absolutely. So that's the NFL for you. That's why I'm always big on players. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away. You know when to run. That's Beyonce. If they trade Lattimore, they take on all of his dead cap. In terms of a general trade, yes. A post-June 1st cut trade or post-June 1st trade would split that dead cap over 2 years. And there are some scenarios where you can see teams maneuver who pays what. But generally, you're not going to find a team that's like, yeah, we'll take on your 30 mil dead cap in exchange for these stipulations. That doesn't really happen. Sometimes it does, but it also depends on the style of contract, because the way New Orleans does contracts, you can't always pass on that because you've already paid it. As in, that's something that, say, you've already done a 50 mil deal, but you've already had 30 million of it as like signing bonuses and stuff paid out. I mean, you're not getting away from that number. You have to pay that number. So New Orleans contracts are a little bit more difficult to try to finagle in how things work cap-wise, just because of how they do the cap. Again, I'm not saying the way they do the cap is wrong, but it does make some things harder. And you can find some of these scenarios online. I don't know if Over the Cap has that exact one. I do know that you have a couple scenarios that you can kind of play with and see, hey, how does this work? Can we find a way to like finagle it? But you talk about Marshawn Lattimore. If you put him as a post cut, that puts his dead money this year at 10.6 million, but still saves you like 4 million. So again, it's all about the style of contract that you're in. So if you traded him before that, you actually take a 16 million dead cap hit right now. Actually, as in your dead cap or your normal cap number would go up 16 million, which would actually put New Orleans in the red. And the dead cap for him this year would be like 32 million. But if you traded him after post-June and made all the things that you wanted to happen, well, then you would actually gain about 4 million in cap space and only have a dead mil of 10.6 this year and push another about 20 dead mil to next year. So there are ways to finagle and move around that if they so choose. But a lot of New Orleans contracts have been manipulated so many times. They're big contracts. You can't manipulate them that much more. A great example is Cameron Jordan. Like, if you cut Cameron Jordan even post June 1st, he still costs you money. If you found a way to trade him, he still cost you 12.6 on your cap this year, and you only get $1 million back because they have maneuvered and restructured and extended and negotiated that thing to just a hell and back, and there's only so much you can do for the proverbial can kicking. So Lattimore would save you a little bit of cap and get you out from under his contract if you did a post-June 1st trade. But I have to be very clear. You're only getting $4 million in cap space. You still will have a debt next year for a guy that's not on the team. And what are you getting in return? What is that $4 million getting you in addition? So probably not very much. So it would have to be a very good value from what you're actually receiving, draft picks and maybe even player, before you go, okay, that was worth it. There are scenarios where we can debate that is worth it. I just don't see many. Right? Now, there are still other things you can do. For example, you can still technically restructure Alvin Kamara for another $8 million if you wanted to. It just depends on how you want to go about things. There are things New Orleans can do for their cap if they want to make a move for a free agent who might be available, a trade that might be available. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot there in the Lattimore value sphere to justify making that move. King says, are you concerned about linebacker depth? Outside Werner and an aging DeMario were pretty thin. Personally, no. Here's why. You actually did just address it. I understand you didn't address it with a high draft pick or anything, but you did just address the position with a guy to develop in. Again, I know Jalen Ford's a 5th rounder. I think that he's probably going to be a special teamer for a couple years, but you are starting to add to that room. And the New Orleans Saints play nickel. And the New Orleans Saints have looked at that position in more ways than just Jalen Ford. So I'm not worried right now about that. Keep in mind that you also brought in Willie Gay. And I liked bringing in Willie Gay. I feel like he was a very valuable quality free agent pickup. I think he's gotten forgotten a little bit because of the draft, but he's only 26 years old. And if he can be healthy, I think he'd be a guy who contributes and you develop into a quality player for the team. You have to hope this team can develop, but you have to hope this team can develop for everybody. But you address the position in two ways, and that's all I can really ask you to do. Besides going out and get a stud, but you have two starters already. So they addressed it by getting a young, up-and-coming free agent in Willie Gay, and you addressed it by drafting a guy on day 3 who has good upside, but is absolutely not ready to go in the NFL as a starting linebacker right now. I have no real issue with that. Now, sure, that means that if a guy gets injured, like DeMario or Pete Warner, you have to hope whoever's behind him can be quality. But that's kind of the case that everybody else is in, too. Not many people just sitting there with a stud middle linebacker behind a stud middle linebacker. I'm happy with the depth because they're addressing the position. No guarantee any of this works out, but still, I mean, as a format, that's what you want, right? That's what you want. You're not at the point where you have to go sign an emergency linebacker if one guy gets injured. You've addressed the position. Not going to argue that the position is something that long-term you can just guarantee confidence in right now. But at the same time, we really praised the picking up of Willie Gay, who's a 2-time Super Bowl champ, by the way, and last year had been elevated to full-time starter. Past 2 years, he's been the full-time starter for Kansas City. People are going to say, well, they let him go. Sure, they did. Not the point. Just because they're not willing to pay somebody and they're willing to let some of their depth move as they have won Super Bowl after Super Bowl, that doesn't mean New Orleans can't take advantage. He'll be 26 this year, and if he can be healthy, that's the key. Now, he was healthy last year. Should be pointed out, Willie Gay was healthy and happy in 2023, but he's had a history of not being healthy. As long as he can be healthy, though, I like these type of moves. These are what we talk about wanting the New Orleans Saints to do. Get guys who are quality players, depth guys, and then hopefully, especially if they're young guys, you turn them into something better. And DeMario Davis became the All-Pro in New Orleans. He was good with the Jets. I mean, I'm not saying that New Orleans made everything about DeMario Davis. The dude was a good player, but DeMario elevated under Dennis Allen and elevated under guys like Nolan, Hodges, the current coaching staff. He's been an All-Pro 5 years in a row, every single year in New Orleans. Was never an All-Pro in New York, was never an All-Pro with Cleveland, never a Pro Bowler. All of this has happened 5 years in a row in New Orleans, and he should be given credit for that. Got to hope that New Orleans could do something similar with the next generation of player. Maybe that guy is Willie Gay, because Willie Gay, by himself, with the team that wins it all, got over the past 2 years like 140 tackles. I know that's not amazing numbers, but DeMario Davis wasn't putting up amazing numbers in New York. He's just putting up good numbers, right? So you got to hope that the team can continue to develop. We'll see where they end up going. DeMario Davis having 5 straight All-Pro years, even if we state what I believe is the obvious, that he is coming to the end of his career, he's still playing at a high level. I mean, if he was an All-Pro last year, literally All-Pro at 34, it's tough for me to believe that at 35 he's going to suck. Now, he might not be an All-Pro anymore. He might hit 35, and you notice a significant amount of his athleticism isn't what it was in, say, 2018. But I think he's still good enough now that I'm not worried about it being an issue for at least 2 or 3 years, and then we'll address that as a problem then. Before we get to that, though, I want to see him hit some milestones. I'd love to see him hit 50 sacks. He's at 42.5. I'd love to see him hit 1,000 tackles, 1,000 solo tackles to end his career. He's at 818 right now. Lots of things I'd like to see him, kind of manage and kind of pull off in his career. I really would love him to have a Super Bowl ring, but that probably isn't going to happen. But I would still love for him to have a successful career, maybe even have a Hall of Fame argument if he can go a couple more years. I mean, 5 All-Pros, even if 4 of them are second team, that's a pretty impressive resume. It's a pretty impressive resume. How do you feel about Nick Saldiveri going into year 2? You're pretty high going into rookie season. How much improvement did you see by the end of the year? I mean, I honestly didn't get to see a ton of Nick Saldiveri improvement because you can get to see a ton of Nick Saldiveri. So That's something to watch in training camp and preseason this year. Because Saldivari only played 4 games last year. You didn't get to see him much. And he was a guy that needed to be developed, but I loved him as a 4th-round pick. I assume everybody's okay with 4th-round picks, no matter who they are, but you only saw him in, games like 4 through 7. I mean, you barely saw him. And he only played, I think, maybe 20 snaps the entire year. So you have to wait to see what he can be. He was physically unable to perform to start the summer last year, and then obviously went on IR in December. So you haven't got to see a lot of Saldivari. I still am excited about him, just like I'm actually excited about the fact that New Orleans addressed 2 positions in the draft. Even if one of them is the very end of the draft, I still think it's worth mentioning. They got a right tackle and a left tackle. Don't believe that left tackle is going to contribute as the starting left tackle this year, but you don't know. You still addressed it. And again, it goes back to like me being happy to see New Orleans address things. Now, Josiah, 7th-round pick, not even the top 200. Can you just sit there and go, hey, he's going to dominate? Oh, definitely not. But 22 years old, good frame. Let's see what happens. See if we can maybe see some good development from this new offensive line coaching system. Ron says DA needs to apologize of you getting a second for Laddie. I think DA needs to do a lot of things, like stick to being a defensive coordinator. That's just me. Hot take of the day. I think that man should stick to being a defensive coordinator, stop being a head coach. But until that happens, I'll just say what's I got to say. And I'll speak my mind. But, yep. DA is DA. I still will never forgive him for apologizing for beating the brakes off Atlanta. I simply can't. Are there any viable options at guard end or tackle? I mean, I'm not trying to play the homer button here, but Andres Pete, he's waiting. He's there. He maybe could be the depth guy you always needed. I'm saying there's not a ton of options, but Andres Pete is staring you in the face, saying, please bring me back. Please let me be just a little bit of what you need. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I think you probably get him for what? 1.5 million? Yeah, give him 1.5 million. Why not? Give him 1.5. That's better than the veteran. That's better than the vet amount. Yeah, if we gave him 1.5 million transaction, put him on the team, you still got 7.5 million in cap space this year. Yeah. Bring back AP. But whoever you're bringing. Oh, he signed already? Really? With the Raiders? I missed that one. No. When did that happen? No. Dang. I last learned live on stream I lost Andres Pete. Man, I have to Google it now, live in stream. It happens. Well, in my defense, it happened very, very recently. So that makes me sad. Makes me sad because he still lists as a free agent. I missed it. Man, got signed 2 days ago. Well, shout out my man, Andres Pete. Shout out my man, Andres Pete. Never forgotten. The greatest injured guard of New Orleans Saints history. Never played a full season. Played a full season in our hearts. Made 3 Pro Bowls. Saints legend, Andres Pete. The irony of all this, last year where he was available for 16 games, the most he's ever been available in New Orleans history. Shout out to you, man. Can you believe that he was with the team for 9 years? If you can't tell, I was holding hope to bring him back. It is what it is. I win the not paying attention award of the day. I win it. At least I got good things with the Marshawn Lattimore segment. At least I had all my notes and my money notes ready for that. Oh, well. Also, shout out to Over the Cap, who still has him listed as a free agent because that's what I was actually playing around with to check what his signing bonuses and stuff would be. So I'm going to put a little bit of blame on other people too because if I'm at fault, so is somebody else. Dalton Risner, I believe, is the best available. Yeah, I mean, that's another veteran name. I'll have to Google, make sure he didn't get signed. But, yeah, I think wherever you're at, New Orleans is at the point where they've got to seriously start bringing in some young talent at offensive line. You've started out with Fuaga, but sadly you flopped on a couple of young studs with Trevor Penning. We assume that's a flop. I believe Penning's going to get your left tackle reps. Andres Pete being gone, bring in Fuaga almost guarantees Penning's going to be your left tackle starter, at least to start things. Pun intended. You better hope that he's showing something. Because if he's not at this point, woof, it's rough. It's rough. Can you do a scouting report on Rattler? I mean, I could. I'll admit that it's been a while since I've done an in-depth study like that for that position. We could. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that as an idea. Work has been kicking my tail this past 2 weeks, but we can. It would be nice to kind of break down. I've watched some of his tape, but I haven't written a quarterback scouting report in probably 2 years. So I'd say I'd be rusty, but it actually sounds like a fun thing to do. Travis says Penning better be improving at left tackle. Bet. Yeah, absolutely. Should. Absolutely. We'll see if it happens, but should. Ben. Here we are. 35 minutes in. Feels like it's 3 years. We've been waiting on that man to develop. Oh, we've been waiting 3 years for the man to develop. Hopefully fast. Because at the moment, all I can say about Derek Carr is the man says all the right things in the offseason. We'll probably do another episode where we talk about some of the things that he has been saying. And I got to admit that in terms of what do you want to hear, he's saying all those things. But, yeah, I'm not hyping him up. Long time, Mike. Long time. Been watching you for 2 years. Appreciate that, Ted. We appreciate the fam. Good to see everybody. Rev, we bring back Kevin White. Hey, if somebody's going to make him into the All-Pro that he always should have been, obviously it's New Orleans. So, best team in the world. New Orleans Saints. Nobody's better. Prove it. You can't. Who dat? Can. You absolutely can. But at least we have our draft picks. At least we've signed them all. And at least we've got almost a completely full roster. I just got to wait for training camp to roll around and see how all these guys look. Only thing I can say, I need the New Orleans Saints to come out this year swinging like Kendrick Lamar. And if you're Team Drake for whatever reason, I respect it. That's fine. But I need the New Orleans Saints to come out like Kendrick Lamar. That's what I need. It's just what I'm wanting. So, Saints roster has a lot of holes like Swiss cheese. I don't know if I'd say that, Travis. But I would say that there are plenty of things that I would love to see be better. But I don't know if I could say it has holes either. Like, I really feel like the Saints have a strong roster. It's just not an elite roster. So, I think it's still a solid roster. Corrado was looked at as being same tier as Bo Nix. Yeah, there's a reason one gets in the first and one doesn't. That's all I'm going to say. It's easy for us to hype up Rattler because he came to the Saints. But I feel like the same things happened to Garrett Grayson. Same things happened to a certain Jake Hayner. There's a reason guys get picked in the fifth. Doesn't mean they can't be developed into something great. But there's plenty of negatives I can say about Rattler's tape as well as positives. My big negative is this man does a lot of, may he be blessed and forever highly favored, Jameis Winston type throws. He does very much God-planned throws. If you don't believe me, go put on some Spencer Rattler tape and watch how he has a tendency to be on his back foot when pressure's coming and yeet that ball. And look, I'm not saying that he can't be talented. I'm just saying that those are things that NFL coaches don't want you doing. So he has plenty of things that need to be worked out, plenty of things that he can get better at, and in other ways that he also has some electrifying potential. But I would say that as somebody who is not a huge fan of the God's plan throws, those are things I would like to see worked on. But I also believe that you have a quarterback who is a quality bridge veteran in front of him, and let's see what happens. But it's like Travis said, he has the tendency to do hero ball, and unless you're Patrick Mahomes, hero ball is something that's a lot easier to pull off in college than it is in the NFL. You don't have a lot of quarterbacks at the NFL level who can just yeet things and throw ropes on a prayer and get praised for it. I would like to see him be a better baseline quarterback who can make those type of big plays. But Jordan Love needed development when he came in, and he got to sit for years and do that. Spencer Rattler now has that same opportunity. So if he puts in all the work, reaches his max potential, you very well have a good starter. And just we'll see what happens. So Gerald says Penning had better been at Jar's garage backyard every day this offseason. We can only hope. We can only hope. We can only pray and hope. So, yeah. Hopes and prayers. Hopes and prayers. Calvin, I'm just being honest. I'm not speaking negatively about Spencer Rattler. I don't want it to be May and June and we're like, yo, the quarterback we just drafted is secretly the next Brady. Nope. Not me. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. And if that makes me buzzkill, I'm sorry. I think there's some positive traits, though, and I have enjoyed watching a little bit of tape. But I'm not going to be like, oh, well, he was kind of comparable to Bo Nix, who went in the first, so he's basically a first rounder. Nope. Not for me. But I respect it and I love it. The energy is high. We love good energy. Yeet. All right, y'all. Look, we try to keep our off-season shows a little bit shorter, so we're going to wrap this up today, but we will be back. Promise you. Not going to let work keep me permanently away. Who dat? God bless. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for hanging out. Hope you have a good time. Share this out. Hit me up. And you know what? Let's see if we can work on that Spencer Rattler film study and scouting report. Maybe together. We'll see. Who dat? God bless. Deuces. Catch you on the next one. Out.
An even better outro than the intro. For the empire and glory to your house.